Howdy again, and today I'm responding to a number of requests I've received to test out the Sony FE 12-24mm f4G camera lens. It's for Sony's mirrorless full-frame cameras, where obviously it can offer an extremely wide angle of 12mm, but with a bit of a zoom range in front of that to give you flexibility. And it's a rectilinear lens, not fisheye, so the idea is that your straight lines stay nice and straight. It is possible nowadays to get even wider angle lenses than that, but not by much, and 12mm will be more than wide enough even for the most serious wide-angle photography enthusiasts. The maximum aperture of f4 lets in a reasonable amount of light too, although if you're shooting indoors or in dark conditions, you will need to put your ISO levels up quite a bit. It's an expensive option though, at £1,500 in the UK or about $1,700 US, so let's hope it's something special. The build quality of the lens is fine. It's nice and small and lightweight, especially for a full frame lens, weighing just over half a kilogram. It does feel a little plasticky to hold, but it's fairly tightly assembled. It's based on a metal lens mount. It's advertised as being dust and moisture resistant, although I can't see a very big weather sealing gasket on the back, so I wouldn't want to use it in heavy rain or underwater or anything. The zoom ring is rubberized, turning smoothly and evenly, and so is the manual focus ring. It's electronically coupled to the lens's focus motor, but works pretty responsively. Here's the level of focus breathing you can expect to see from the lens, a slight zooming in as you focus more closely, nothing disastrous though. The lens's autofocus motor is quick, silent and accurate, you won't notice it at all in use. The lens's curved front element precludes you from using conventional screw-in filters on the front, and also I don't think there's room at the back for rear gel filters either. A number of companies have come up with front filter adapters for this lens though. For example, here's the lens with a Haida M15 filter system attached to it, which I was testing out at the time and worked really well. The lens has a switch for changing between auto and manual focus, as well as a focus hold button, and it also comes with the usual front and rear lens caps. Overall, Sony have gone for small, light and simple in their design philosophy here, and the lens works perfectly well, even if it doesn't exactly feel like it's carved out of granite. Okay, well, let's look at image quality. Firstly, on a full frame camera, my 42 megapixel Sony a7R II. At 12mm and f4, image quality in the middle is perfect, incredibly sharp with great contrast. And the good news is that those corners look great too, only a tiny bit softer. Still, a great performance there. Stopping down the aperture, say to f8, only reveals minuscule improvements and a bit more brightness. Stop down as far as f16 and softness begins to creep in from the effect of diffraction. Still, a great start at 12mm. So let's zoom in to 24mm. And it's the same story in the middle of the image, excellent contrast and sharpness, straight from f4. The corners look a wee bit softer now than they did at 12mm, but still not bad by any means. Stop down to f5.6, f8 and f11 for some clear little improvements. Overall though, it is an impressively sharp lens on such a high resolution full frame camera. Well, let's try it now on a 24 megapixel APS-C camera, where 12-24mm is still a nice ultra-wide angle zoom range. It's good news at 12mm, with the lens displaying brilliant sharpness and contrast straight from f4 in the middle of the image and over into the corners too. It stays this sharp down to about f11, where you can begin to see a little softness from diffraction creeping in. So let's zoom into 24mm. Just like on full frame, from f4, sharpness remains brilliant in the middle, but a bit softer in the corners. Stop down to f5.6 or f8 for some very tiny improvements, but the corners are never fully sharp at 24mm. So it's quite a nice performance on APS-C, particularly at the lens's widest angles. Alright, let's move on and look at distortion and vignetting on a full frame camera. These are normally taken care of automatically by your camera, but you can turn corrections off to see the real picture. At 12mm, we see only moderate barrel distortion here, but vignetting is very heavy at f4, those corners look pretty dark without corrections. Even if you stop down the aperture as far as f8 or f11, that vignetting sticks around. At around 14mm, the distortion kind of straightens out, and zoom into 24mm to see some pincushion distortion, but nothing too bad. Vignetting is still pretty bad at f4, but stop down to f8 for a bit more brightness in the corners. So you'll definitely want to keep your camera's vignetting correction turned on at least. Actually, even with it turned on, you might notice in your pictures that at 12mm, the corners have a slightly blue hint to them, which is noticeable to those looking closely enough. I've noticed this on other full-frame extreme wide-angle lenses before, namely the Venus Optics 10 to 18mm lens and the Samyang XP 10mm lens. Well, that's enough about vignetting, let's see about close-up image quality. I found that the lens seemed to be able to focus a tiny bit closer than the advertised 28cm to your subject. It can actually get reasonably close to small subjects at 24mm. Image quality at f4 is slightly soft with low contrast. Stop down to f5.6 though, and it's miles better. Let's see how the lens works against bright lights, and the answer is not too badly. Contrast remains quite strong, but we do see some flecks of flaring popping up around the place. And while we're working in the dark here, let's take a quick look at coma levels. Bright points of light on the edge of your pictures will show just a little bit of coma smearing, but it's nothing too horrifying, and you can stop down to f5.6 to tame it down a little if you like. And finally, bokeh. This lens is absolutely not designed with getting out of focus backgrounds as a priority, but if you do zoom in and get close to your subject, then at f4, the bokeh will look quite nice and smooth if that's really what you're after. So overall, the lens is great really. It's small, lightweight, nice and sharp, and it has no serious image quality problems at all. I'll be honest though, it didn't inspire me as much as the recently released Sigma 14 to 24mm f2.8 DG-DN Art lens. The Sigma lens cannot zoom out as far as the Sony, that's true. But actually, I pretty much found it better in most other ways, as you can see here, and its maximum aperture of f2.8 opens up a bit of astrophotography for you. I even found it to be just the tiniest bit sharper, and it's even a little less expensive. I would personally go for the Sigma lens any day, but if your key interest is in getting the widest pictures possible, as wide as 12mm, then a Sony lens remains a great option.